Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Reminds me, I still need to
It's
write.
like World War II
need to write a check for Peter.
Oh,
We
for
never
that.
did that.
We haven't paid them. Good evening. I am going to call the Planning Commission and Village Council joint meeting to order. Rhonda, can we have a roll call, please?
Yeah. I just realized I only have one paper in front of me, but it's okay. Jason Holzhausen.
Here.
Maria Delkey.
Here.
Bruce Farrell.
Here.
Richard Hamilton.
Here.
Troy Newman.
Here.
Amanda Pullen.
Here.
Di Wilkie.
Here.
Robert Bishop.
Here.
Got you. Mike Kramer.
Here.
Ian Williams.
Here.
Kevin Smith. Steve Baldry.
Here.
Mackenzie Peters.
Here.
Whoosh.
Thank you. We have the Pledge of Allegiance on our agenda. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We have an agenda before us. Comments, questions? Fantastic. Who's,
We approve the agenda as written.
Support.
you can pick one, Rhonda. We have a motion with support to approve our agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. We have our agenda. Planning Commission minutes from May 8th. Maria, questions, corrections, spelling mistakes? We're good?
Nuh-uh.
Pass, but yeah.
She's the English
It
major.
seems to happen more and more frequently.
She's figured out she can call Thursday morning and be like, yeah, here's my list. I don't like the inflection of it's right here. We need to change that to it's.
All right, let's make that motion.
I will. Approval of minutes from last week, or last month, I'm sorry, as written.
Support.
We have a motion with support to approve the Planning Commission minutes from May 8th. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? There we are. Public comment session number 1. Seeing head shakes? All right. Moving on to new business. All right, accessory dwelling units. The planning commission brought this up at our last meeting. Essentially, the planning commission would like to take the temperature of village council before we put in hours of work and effort and possibly attorney costs regarding accessory dwelling units. So Doug wrote a memo.
So yeah, a little bit about the background. We were reviewing the strategic plan updates discussion at the last meeting, where this is one of the potential tools or resources that was discussed that could assist with alleviating some of the additional housing that's needed in the future. Currently, our master plan, which is, the community engagement portion, says what the residents want. The master plan does list, as you can see in the bottom of this memo, looking towards accessory dwelling units and missing middle housing opportunities. However, our zoning ordinance does not allow this. So we have a direct conflict. That's the reason as to why we're hoping to start this discussion, because it's not generally viewed as a good practice, where the letter of the law does not align with the spirit of the law, being what the residents were looking for and what the municipal code says. So ideally, if we could discuss any potential comments, questions, or concerns pertaining to accessory dwelling units. One of the recommendations, that was listed was this could potentially be used as a tool for some of the lots that are slightly larger, as to where the density or the units per acre is not going to align with what our future land use map shows. It would be far less. Those lots may be options for possibly allowing ADUs, as to where other lots that may be viewed as smaller may not be able to potentially have that option. But there's additional language that could be looked into. Just not certain what council's interactions have been with the possible consideration of accessory dwelling units. Comments, questions, concerns pertaining to that?
I have a question.
Sure.
How often do you or the village receive requests for accessory dwellings?
I've had 2 requests since I've been here for 2 different lots that both had unique situations, where the one, for example, did have 2 separate potential parcels that it might have been best used for the property, because the other parcel likely isn't buildable for a couple reasons. So this could have potentially allowed them to better utilize their lot.
Were those requests attached or detached?
That one would have been detached, but I did not receive formal plans. So it could have potentially gone either way.
What were the sizes of the lots in question?
So the one lot in question would have been around 1 acre. The other one would have been around 3/4 of an acre. And they're single family. Well, the one is single family. The other has been turned into a duplex, and that property is zoned as transitional mixed use. And it is a budding commercial lot.
I know there's some strong opinions sitting
Well-
in this room about ADUs, so let's hear them.
Yeah.
So the concern is the problems that this is going to create long-term. Just in crafting the ordinance, we're going to have to be very intentional about how we word this. We want to make sure that our construction standards are concise. If this is going to be a unit that's detached, it needs to pass inspection. This is not going to be half a residence where someone has to come to the main building to use the restroom. We need to make sure that if this becomes a rental, that we're regulating it. Because now you've got a landlord situation where someone doesn't actually have road frontage on an accessory dwelling unit, and there's going to be an argument over the driveway at some point. You can see that coming a mile away. So there needs to be clear verbiage on use contracts if this is going to become a rental, and inspections to make sure that it's kept to standard. Yeah, this is going to be worse than our sign ordinance. I don't think $2,000 is going to cover.
So, and one thing, if I might add as well, speaking on the opposite side too, we did have a petition that came before the ZBA just last year, where there was no discussion about this. However, they were able to get building permits to add plumbing to that property, without zoning approval. So there might be instances that we need to potentially tidy up the code either way this goes, because it's possible that people are getting the appropriate building permits, but they're not getting the zoning approval to do this.
It's also highly probable and possible that corner lots are more appropriate than interior lots. And you got double access to the property, assuming it's large enough to.
Well, yeah, I think the ordinance would definitely is specifications, because we have some fairly small lots in the village. But
We would just need on our existing lot coverage ordinance at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My biggest concern would be the creativity that would go into these things, pulling a trailer in the back, building it out. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the shortest path is simply, you're going to make an exception for 2, then everyone with a third of an acre is going to start. I mean, my lot is fairly small. I can't even imagine sure, a tiny home, and they've seen them all on TV, but I'll be honest, those are homes on wheels. And I think that what we end up with is it'll end up leading to a lot of variances and a lot of exceptions that are going to bend a rule that's going to end up having these little small things parked in everybody's backyard. Honestly, as it's stated, it doesn't allow them. I think the shortest path, and I think the cleanest path for the community, especially it's not the art of the possible in this situation. It's the art of opinions that live around them and having to deal with what happens if they build a tiny home or put something in the back and then it's a 200 square foot dwelling. Next thing you know, people are going to start, well, if there's a home if there's a dwelling on the back of X person's property, then I can build a pole barn the same size. And then you start to get into a situation where people's backyards start having disproportionate outbuildings. And
well, we do have lot coverage ordinance. We wouldn't be the first ones to do this. And so homes on wheels would not be an accessory dwelling unit.
Tiny homes wouldn't be permitted either.
Yeah. So an accessory dwelling unit, I don't think we would have tiny home, something on wheels there. We wouldn't have to draw this from scratch. And I'm just saying as devil's advocate here of there, I think there is a way we could do it that would mesh well with some areas of the village, but not all.
You could have minimum construction standards, just like we do for a house. It's not a pole building, it's not a slab, it's gotta have a foundation. It can't have wheels, it can't have a metal frame, all those things we could do.
Yeah. One thing could be some of the houses, the older homes here that have carriage houses. Converting one of them to a home would be an accessory dwelling unit. And it would be putting a second family on a lot, and you haven't actually changed the lot.
Yeah, but you need to make sure that carriage house meets
Well,
construction.
yes,
standards. And
yeah.
That's hard to enforce at that point, because now you're retrofitting an existing building that wasn't qualified to be a carriage house when it was built, let alone a residence at this point. You know, that's a lot of time and effort for PCI, and our ordinances need to be concrete if that's what we're gonna allow. Because
Enforceable.
they're already allowing pulling permits to buildings that are not in our code. What happens when we change the code and it's gonna be just like our police contract, they gotta know the ordinances just like we do.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be a lot, like I said, a lot more than $2,000. I'm not opposed to the concept, but this is just like any other development in town. We need to be ahead of it, and we need to be very concise on what we want and expect in this space.
So and
Otherwise, we get metal storage containers.
just regarding the budget, the reason as to why the 2,000 was listed is because I do not want to utilize too much of this year's budget, realizing that this is going to be something that if this was going forward, it would go into next year. And then that way, if there was additional legal fees, it's something that could be, potentially budgeted for.
would council be amenable to staff and planning commission getting a very broad stroke? Something probably from a similar, not too much larger municipality that already has this? And just broad strokes of lot coverage, building standards. Like I said, we wouldn't be the first ones in the state to do this. Somebody's done this
Yeah, that's what I was
already
gonna ask.
that
Are
we
there
can,
other ones that we
we can steal from.
can see? Yeah.
Borrow.
Borrow,
I mean, it's public
yes.
information, just
Again, I just, but my bigger concern is sentiment. There's a very, if there's been 2 requests, are we breaking a seal on something that, again, it's enforceability,
yeah.
it's complexity, there's additional layers. As an analogy, Alec always asks the board, okay, we can put as many parks in the village as you like, but at some point, someone's got to mow the yard and someone's got to keep that dwelling up to snuff. And my bigger concern here is it as enforceable when it's in somebody's backyard? There's not roadside access to see it potentially. This opens up layers of accessibility issues and enforceability issues that I'm quite frankly just hearing the proposal to go down this road adds a measure of anxiety that I think we are trying to unwind this granularity. And just because it's been done doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do for the community. And I'm concerned that we are struggling to some degree where there's a lot of folks that are buying a 1/3 acre lot and pretending that they have 10 acres and stuffing as much stuff on that 1/3 acre as they possibly can. And to some degree, I see the investment being, it's passive income. It certainly it's a good idea, but I think at the end of the day, 1/3 of an acre lot is a very small lot. And if it's permissible to build an external building that has a family or a renter in it, I feel like this is going to be very complex to enforce and to maintain over the years in general. And it's a small appetite. I mean, if there were 100 requests, I would say that we were probably on a path to where we would want to consider it, but 2 out of however many lots we have in the community, I don't know if this is appropriate to bend it and invest the time, effort, and energy into it.
Yeah, I can't say how many members of the community. I can only say that the master plan public engagement, that's what residents were looking for. But absolutely, whatever directive it is, what we're thinking about, this is really just hopeful in regards to whether this is something that could potentially be a short-term goal attacked over the next year, or if this is something that potentially, gets pushed back. And when we're looking at doing master plan updates in the upcoming year, then we can, see what the community sentiment is at that time. And maybe that'll give additional information that warrants further discussion on this or just sunsetting the conversation.
So we've only had 2 requests, but we
That's
have
correct.
community interest.
Yes, that's correct.
So I guess my question to council is this a 24-25 thing we try to tackle, or is this a next master plan talk again?
I think the plan of starting with public participation and asking what the one is first is a solid start. I just texted my daughter to ask her what show she's watching, but she watches a lot of that garbage reality television. And legit last week, she was watching one where this family renovated their garage and made it a living space, and a couple moved in, and then things went sour 2 months in. And the next thing you know, there's cops there 3 times a week. And is that what we want to invite into the community? Because we're opening up accessory dwelling units. Are we going to have that? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But-
These aren't
but-
professional land property
Yeah.
managers or anything like that.
We're not going to be having someone that's, a commercial developer. We're going to have residents that are building these contracts and probably not being reviewed unless we have incorporated into the permitting process staff time to review contracts to make sure that there's something in place to protect the people renting.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I know some places don't allow rental with that. It really is an accessory dwelling unit, like your granny. Yeah, it's a mother-in-law suite. It's for family.
So
And
We
the
say
thought
that, but
process-
we have-
No,
we have
I'm
PUDs
saying-
that are
no,
renting out
I get
40%
that.
of their
I get
unit
that, but I'm
property.
saying, I know someone who just did this a few years ago in Irving Township, and when they went to the county, that's the qualifier. When your loved one is ready to no longer be in that space reverts back to what it was. It's not allowed to be rental property.
The city of Grand Rapids, their new accessory dwelling unit ordinance is rentals allowed, but no short-term rental. So that's how they handle that. But- So I guess hearing
But
comments, it would be,
At the same time, now you have a building that is a legal non-conforming structure because it was allowed to be built in the first place, and what they do with it is out of our control because it was built there.
And the big question I would have is, and of course, probably can't answer this, but what was the purpose of building the accessory building? Is it for a loved one that couldn't find affordable housing in the village? Is that the real issue? And if so, we've got 144 apartments going up. So, I guess that would be, why would someone want an accessory building, which would merit the community input?
So part of this is related to the missing middle housing.
Mhm.
And missing middle isn't just talking about workforce housing, similar to like what the Mid-Villa project is, but it's looking at alternative housing types. So this is something like what Commissioner Newman had stated about individuals may have like mother-in-laws or other individuals
Yeah.
that may be of a certain age that they may or may not be able to live independent, but they might want to live close to their family. So this can be a unique situation as to where they can have their separate living quarters while also, being close proximity to filling any family needs.
Yeah, that was the central theme of the workshop we went to in Hastings, was family members. And that's essentially the way Hastings is structured their accessory building.
And while that's a noble intention to do that, it's all out the window when it's built because, just like you said, when that member passes away, how do we regulate it? We told you can't do this, but we can't stop you because it's a legal non-conforming structure.
so I think if we make, for the planning commission, make accessory dwelling units a feature of future public input sessions, gather more information, see how many residents feel that it is a need or don't, and then we will come back to it.
So the question, would the accessory dwelling unit be a standalone building?
It doesn't have to be.
Okay. So-
An accessory dwelling unit could be an extension, a separate dwelling that is attached. So it could be a mother-in-law suite type of deal that is attached to the house, but it's completely separate. So own bathroom, own kitchen, completely separate living spaces, but could be attached to a current structure. Yeah. A basement conversion, walk-up attic conversion.
Yep.
Things like that could also
Redoing
be
your garage.
accessory dwelling units. Yeah. So. Okay. Now we have Doug put together a nice presentation for us.
So I apologize if it's a little clunky, but we don't have the access to PowerPoint, so we're going to make the best of the situation. So give Rhonda a second to set up. But yeah, so today, this is a little bit about the itinerary, just to give you an idea of what it is that we're intended to discuss. But if we can go ahead and move on. So first thing, why are we here? No, the goal today is not to contemplate the meaning of life, but to workshop areas the Plan Commission and Village Council have control over. So if you look at the slide, I put together a little explanation in regards to what roles and obligations are of the Plan Commission in regards to the Village Council. We could potentially move to the next one. So I'm really hoping that, if we can start off with a discussion, are the roles and responsibilities listed below a fair description of each body's roles in relation to each other, Or does anyone have a different understanding related to what's presented before you? Can everyone read that? If anyone needs to print out, just.
I think it is a fair assessment, Doug.
Any other comments? All right. Rhonda, if you wouldn't mind. No worries.
Don't you have the clicker right there?
Well, it doesn't work.
Oh.
It's not,
It's the
unfortunately.
scroll wheel.
So I'm going to try to have people work in smaller groups where we're going to each have one of the items that is listed. Gotta grab stuff. So these are the items that are presented within the slide. Where I'm hoping that. So these are each important documents for varying reasons. Just to let you know, so the 2017 Public Participation Plan is what's been adopted by the Village Council in 2017, where the RRC 6-step guide, that's what they put together for best practices. And I have put together, a preliminary draft to hopefully start off the conversation, what potentially could be adopted from the public participation strategies. But Rhonda, if you wouldn't mind. So I don't want to inundate you with a lot of reading, but I do want to make sure that these are what the similarities as well as the differences when you're looking at the 2017 plan along with the proposed draft revisions. So there are a handful of similarities, but really like us to focus on the differences. So if you're looking at the 2017 plan, you'll see that it says plans utilizing public participation. So that's any plan that has been adopted by anybody where, quite frankly, this is information that most boards are sending to the Village Council on an annual basis, or you're getting meeting minutes that are detailing this information. So my perception was that that wasn't necessarily as valuable to the Village Council when looking at a public participation plan. So I kind of had a different perspective where, go into what the purpose of the strategies are, along with references to regulations, that being state ordinances or laws. Also, village processes utilizing public participation. This is important because it details the various processes that may require some level of community engagement. And then what I think is the ultimate talking point is the communication toolbox, which we can get into a little later. So if we can move on, Rhonda. So why do we have public participation strategies? So this doctrine was designated or designed for anyone with interest in the village of Middleville. This explains various communication tools that the village utilizes to better engage with its residents. Additionally, it shows when the public should receive communication on various planning measures. This is a standard for entities when engaging with the public. So for this discussion, hoping we can discuss each a little bit individually. And I don't know if you ladies might not mind looking with Maria, having a discussion with that section there, because there certainly are some of these factors do affect the DDA as well, because this talks about how and when public engagement should occur. So if in our groups, we can look at the updated plan and have a discussion, which Mr. President, if you wouldn't mind discussing this with the members on your left, and Chairperson, if you could discuss with the members on your right.
Your left, my left.
I'm sorry, opposite, yes,
Okay.
stage. If we could have these conversations regarding key stakeholders being the first one, and then the remaining group over here having a discussion Does anyone, going to take a few minutes, have a different perspective on what the key stakeholders are within the village? So if we those 18 groups, see if anyone has any perception about someone that potentially should or shouldn't be on there that may or may not be currently part of that list.
Yeah.
That if it's 18, it seems larger, but I read it, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Downtown merchants, what is that?
Yeah, that would be you.
Jason took my new.
Oh, I did, sorry.
It's for the,
I know,
like, the economic chamber.
Well, I think that
This one right here, we're supposed to.
well,
no,
18,
very
it's the same 18, but is there anybody missing?
Same person runs
Are there
it.
people there that should be there?
Starters.
I think would be the biggest thing.
Look over here.
Being that that's
Okay,
I always.
yeah, come on, you gotta flip in.
Individually.
Yeah, actually, I showered today.
Or manufacturing, I mean, I think, we do have a large factory in our backyard, but my bigger concern would be we make decisions very frequently based on what Bradford White wants at the peril of other stakeholders. And
Yeah, that has happened in the past.
yeah,
there's more than them.
yeah, and I think that, listing them as a
Spectrum Health.
stakeholder is important, but where's I think this list is fairly comprehensive, but I'm concerned about how much weight each of them are given, because we often, again, we make decisions on these key stakeholders at the peril, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just like spectrum, I mean, it's too specific.
Yeah.
It's not safe.
Yeah.
Like an emergency, whatever. Other, I mean, entrepreneurs.
I don't see any differences.
I think it's kind of redundant. And then, to me, that's an entrepreneur. Well, I'm just telling you, Jason.
He's a fourth grader.
Well, mine did it in fifth grade.
But I think,
I mean, I have a question, what qualifies Bradford White as a key stakeholder?
Because I'm.
As they're privately owned.
So that, that's striking Bradford White, striking.
What's that threshold?
manufacturers, and striking Spectrum Health, and striking other where.
Well, we're
Well, I
the
think
second largest
entrepreneurs
private employer in Millville.
a greater sum.
Should be on there.
A variety of interests.
No.
Bradford White has a seat at the table.
What would an entrepreneur be?
Yeah.
So we're already.
We have to send a postcard out
Yeah.
to people.
And we
that-
service our seniors.
So business owners in general is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like 56, but still.
Because you don't want to have to keep redoing this. Business comes in, or a big company.
So that would be.
And, we have over 80 80
Yeah, they're not
occupants and residents
No,
in the space.
I would
say
replace,
just manufacturing.
I would replace the downtown merchants
Yeah.
there, village business owners.
Yeah, I would say.
Business owners within the village, yeah.
Yeah, because
I think that would send a much clearer message that, because I think that some
Yeah.
in the community.
Well, but
believe
Say,
that-
Trinity Health now, yeah. But I don't see,
I don't disagree
Gives
with
them,
that.
yeah, far more
But-
influence than an
I-
outcome.
Can I write on this?
It's just.
Doug,
I
can
feel like that is
If I
a level of favoritism that
manufacturers
show,
in the village.
well, that is beyond.
Says what?
So
It
if
just
you could
says,
favoritism or is it community
entrepreneurs.
Three, But if you were to pull them,
No,
right,
because we're part of service
don't care
receivers.
might only be one.
Because so have faith-based.
Having a seat at the
So
table.
why isn't,
They
why,
weren't sure whether or not
They often say what we're gonna do. Frequently, control of revenues, land, and so I get it, but I also want to make sure that we're not sending a message that we are specifically targeting
That I don't know which
Yeah.
one of them.
spectrum,
Into
red,
it, but I'm sure both of them
Downtown
are.
I think generalization.
I know there's an existing.
And a lot easier to manage.
So the two on here, I don't know.
and they
would probably like more robust, but I
paid
don't
a
know.
ton of money to have
Well,
that
it's-
fiber.
Faith-based
Yeah, I don't know if that's services,
Right, I agree.
or if somebody else is gonna slide up. So.
It says
Key
us
contributors.
Yes, but
But not
Is it Silver Brothers?
No, no, don't worry about that.
Do you want to ostracize the other merchants by saying downtown?
no, it's
So
like,
we already said
Oh,
that.
okay.
Change it.
yeah.
But just the argument,
Is that?
the argument that they're a
Or
preferred.
businesses in general.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed that one.
Because I think that you also are gonna have, you know,
And-
larger
and
organizations.
I
that
think
have-
that any manufacturer that
would be
I think
Ed
anyone
Renacos
else that would,
cleaned up that site,
Anyone else
soccer
that would
I
factory in
do
there.
think
You
though
still
that
couldn't have.
leaving,
that state,
like, keep
state.
calling
I
out
understand,
manufacturers
but still.
outside
But if
of
they did that. then
businesses.
They'd probably be going right here.
the distinction between businesses being.
Yeah, there you go.
Because they are retail,
Yeah. But
They are
leaving manufacturers. are
other
business,
manufacturers.
generic.
All right, so if everyone, if we can come back together and
Is that a better
I think
rationale?
a master plan-
really like to hear what some of the feedback is from the individual groups. Uh, So if one of you could report out, I know you had a couple different ideas and potential changes that you've seen.
We had a concern over calling out Bradford White specifically and then calling out other manufacturers, but I feel like consensus is community enough.
Okay.
They were in their spot up there. And then we just corrected number 18
Corval.
to fix the name Corval, and then also include U of M Health because they've been buying up hospitals too. Because the Caledonia office, the Byron Center Hospital, we don't know officially who has purchased the outlot, so
Okay.
out of the conversation would be the idea. I mean, at that point, we could also have Trinity Health in there too, because we don't know if they purchased it. They are also Caledonia.
It's true.
We could just scratch that and just put community health organizations at that point.
Okay.
We also have Cherry Health and Hastings too.
True. And that might make, especially with a lot of these recent changes.
Reach out to all of them.
So our group went, we took the hatchet to this list a little, maybe, a little more than you guys did. One is not specifically, we decided to scratch Bradford White, faith-based organizations and service clubs. Bradford White, because it's calling out a manufacturer, they're not the only manufacturer in town. And the other two, we labeled as contributors, but maybe not necessarily key stakeholders. Number 7, we replaced downtown merchants with just commercial businesses.
Okay.
And then striking other from manufacturers, just calling out manufacturers, but not anybody in particular. We scratched out entrepreneurs, labeling them as just businesses. And then we scratched Spectrum Health right off the list.
Okay, so can we hear from the third group?
We mostly focused on the Spectrum Health item
Okay.
and didn't really see the need to have them as a key stakeholder either.
But do we all agree that the possibility of community health organizations in general being a key stakeholder to community? Okay.
Followed a lot of what they said with like generalizing more of the terms, talking more about general business and general.
If we said general health, that would take in
Fair.
Yeah, just healthcare in general.
Okay.
I think if you call anybody out specifically, you run the risk of appearing to have favoritism and at the peril of folks that are equally as hardworking, smaller businesses that are in the same category. So
Thank you. So what about village processes utilizing public participation? So the reason I bring this up is because there's an ever evolving planning jargon that is utilized for different types of methodology for engaging with the public. When you're looking at this document, I'm hoping as a group, each of you discuss whether or not there's any potential community outreach or types of engagement that we might use as a municipality for seeking public feedback. That you will see that there is quite a list. The list is in line with what you see in the RRC best practices as well. So you can reference both of those documents. The definitions and so forth may be slightly different, but if anyone is aware of any process besides those that we may utilize for public engagement, remind you, ultimately, this is really, preparing a checklist or a responsibility from what the village council can expect from boards similar to the Plan Commission regarding when, where, and how to receive public feedback. And if you're looking at that document as well, it does not specify Downtown Development Authority. However, it does specify downtown development. So it has processes and procedures in there for when items are happening within the downtown.
Doug, can you speak to the efficacy of surveys?
The efficacy of surveys, it all depends on how and when they're utilized. So ideally, I will gladly speak to that when we get to the communication methods. So as soon as, I verify if there are any potential comments, questions, or concerns or corrections that may be needed, I will gladly address your question.
So just to speak on the walkabouts, I think that is something that only works when you have the right people involved. We did a walkabout on how to try to mitigate our traffic issues with the Blue Zones representative. And it was made absolutely transparent based on their comments that they really didn't care about our residents. Let's just take this driveway and make a traffic circle here. It's like having the right stakeholders at each of these events is going to make them much more effective. I feel.
Thank you. That's really good feedback. That's just getting the minds stewing for the next conversation point. Does anyone over there, any comments, questions, or concerns pertaining to any of the methods that we might employ for engaging with the public?
I certainly like what you have on the new option versus the old. Those two detailed in the old, version of it.
Thank you.
It's unfortunate that a lot of public engagement only happens when they're mad at us.
Fair enough. So
I find it kind of interesting, the number one list of stakeholders, residents, we haven't discussed at all how we engage with them.
So that's what this purpose is for, is because let's start on communication methods. All right. So anything that happens in the village, there's certain there's certain tools that are better utilized, whether it's walkabouts or surveys, depending on what it is that's being addressed or the goal that's being achieved. So you'll see on the very last page of the updated draft document that there is a table which I would love for your feedback on. What this is this is suggesting when and where and how we should use those tools interchangeably. Because you are correct, Mr. President, that a walkabout does not always, resolve those issues and surveys. However, they can be a very great tool when used in the early stages to figure out what it is that potentially needs to be addressed. Similar to the accessory dwelling unit conversation we had, looking to see what the community is looking for, trying to get some of the additional feedback so we're not utilizing legal fees on something that maybe is looking to just a small minority of the residents. Not all of it can be changed. Certainly, a lot of the items that are listed as required may be required by Michigan State code. However, some of this is open to suggestion and interpretation. So I'm really curious about what the expectations are. being that some of these items are listed as recommended, others are listed as required versus optional. Hopefully we can discuss what your thoughts are while looking at those. If you see something that really shocks you or something that may be slightly out of line, what are your thoughts?
I think so we blended a little bit here, public participation and methods in which we communicate, of which they're inextricably connected, right? If the residents don't participate in a survey, or if they're not aware of a walkabout, or if they're not, I think that one leads the other. And I think what we as a government body, we lack the understanding of what we're not meeting our people where they are, wherever that place is, whether that's social media, whether that's SMS texts, whether that's whatever. We are lacking in our ability to spur participation, public participation, to get effective means to communicate, and we're not using effective means to communicate with them or to even organize an effective means of communication. So if we wanted to organize a walkabout and we post it on the village webpage, of which may or may not reach anyone that might be interested in participating in that, I think that we have to be very aware that public participation is the key to nearly everything that we do, and we can have some very aggressive and effective people, one or two people in the community that can go and get on the ground, walk into a business, get a list of interested people to participate in a decision. But at the end of the day, we could have 15 or 20 of those folks if we just knew how to get a hold of them or knew how to meet them where they were. So I think public participation, it relies on our ability to effectively communicate, and then the method in which we're communicating. If we send a survey, unless it says like the Census Bureau sends something and says your participation is required by law, people will respond to that. If you send out, you put something on Facebook, for instance, how are we tracking that? What data suggests that the right people are getting those messages? And I don't know. And I think that we fail in public engagement because we're not communicating correctly. So I know that we jumped right into the communication methods, but I'm concerned that we are not spending enough time on meeting our people where they are and getting their feedback appropriate.
And that's a very good conversation to be had, especially with individual, whether it's, other staff or specific boards, since we mentioned walkabouts is an example. So predominantly what this table suggests is that walkabouts are mostly optional. They're required for corridor improvement plans. So if there's going to be a corridor improvement, we need to conduct a walkabout. Capital improvement plans and parks and rec plans, they're recommended. That's what we had there. So generally, if there is any type of CIP, looking at what it is that is needed from a public perspective, it will be recommended, but it might not be applicable in every instance. So that would be a conversation when you're getting those reports in regards to what it is that's being done, where the parks and rec is very similar.
See, now, if we're using the corridor improvement plan, it would be a useful tool if we get the right people there.
Yeah.
We notice the residents affected and the businesses that would be affected, and do the walkabout with them, not do it with some engineer from New York.
Okay.
I think we're gonna get valuable input as to how we shape that landscape that's gonna immediately affect them.
Which goes to the process, right? The process of getting the right people engaged. And are we? Question of the day.
And we're absolutely trying to constantly evolve that, just like the technology. However, some of these other items, just the public hearings, that's fairly, there's not a lot of wiggle room in that. I'm just trying to be transparent. It kind of is what it is. But, social networking, being, how the conversation or how things are constantly evolving, it's been listed as optional across every board. There aren't any that's being suggested as recommended or required. Any thoughts on that, or like standing committees, when and how? Yes.
So, social networking. I mean, there's more than just posting, and obviously, digital marketing is a whole mess of staff time and everything else. And I'm not suggesting that because we're not selling anything, but it's a good tool to utilize, especially when people aren't reading newspapers anymore. People aren't, they're scrolling. So if we were to do, you can purchase ads for less than what you can purchase a newspaper ad for. You can do posts, say, hey, check out our Facebook page. It has all the current, there's more than just posting information. There's also enticing people to follow the pages. And I think you would get a little bit more participation if we were to make strategic efforts in enticing people to follow pages and promoting, you posted, I think we paid JAD however many dollars to post, open positions and applications. Well, we could have spent less doing Facebook ads, you know what I mean? So, and circulating them that way. Yeah.
And that's all good
Yeah,
feedback too, that, we can work with staff and legal counsel to see what can potentially be done there.
Right.
So from what I heard, maybe, we stipulate something in regards to how we define walkabouts, and some of this adding the right person, that's kind of what I'm hearing.
It'd be a mix and match for like a walkabout in an affected area. We could do a mailing like we would for a public hearing.
Yeah, direct
zoning
Okay.
request.
Yeah.
The social media would be a bit more sticky because we want to make sure we're not accidentally creating a forum on
Yeah.
social media.
Well, obviously, there'd be rules of engagement for the elected officials and the board members, but we're just talking like clerk level, advertisements or engagements. If the community wants to, I mean, there's big no-nos. We go through the training of what not to do on social media. We can't stop each other from doing it, but what not to do. And, there's certainly rules of engagement for our appointed board members and our elected officials, but, again, that would be clerk level stuff and
What's the
sharing things.
difference between a Facebook ad and the fact that we put stuff on our Facebook?
Well, a face,
I-
And it's how we push it out. Like if we push it out without comments, just this is information.
it's like
It's
$7.
been over a couple times.
When you pay for a Facebook ad, it promotes out people's feeds. So
It
instead of
forces
seeing
it on
everywhere,
feeds.
you're
Okay.
seeing it
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can target it
Yeah.
specifically.
It's like a boost button, boost your ad, and it's like $7 for a boost.
And just because
We-
we
we-
put something in our group doesn't mean everybody's gonna see it.
Yeah, we'll do that for soccer, advertising for soccer. We'll spend $20-$50 to target that ad for a fundraiser to a certain demographic, and it will just show up on people's feeds.
Yeah, if we're talking communication, if you want to go where the people are, I don't even know how many people want to talk politics when they're supposed to be dancing with their daughters at a father-daughter dance. So it's just, you already have my phone number, text me now, and we'll talk later, because I have to go clean up vomit in the bathroom.
So is there any other feedback pertaining to this? I think we have a good consensus. There's a couple things that could be not so much related to the public participation strategies. Excuse me.
I think having all of these in the toolbox would be huge, just to be able to choose which one's going to work. Because they're going to have varying levels of efficacy. Like a focus group would be good if we're looking at what kind of businesses we would need to complement what we already have. Because, there's a couple lots here. We also have an entire highway commercial corridor that's also in the DD district that could use some love too.
I think to the end here is that we have several boards that should contemplate when something, if we wanted to have or engage in a walkabout, it should be stated procedurally that we plan on doing X on Facebook, or we plan on doing Y in the newspaper or whatever. But I think we as a board, should be aware and have an opinion about who is communicated with, how they're being communicated with, and have the ability to comment or even request the efficacy of such efforts. I think sending it out to the ether and not getting any data back to suggest that we were actually effective in our method is why sometimes we have 2 people with public comment and sometimes we have 30, because somebody took the initiative as a resident to say, hey, this is going on, you need to show up. Versus when the board gets it, we're just like, yep, we need to make a public announcement, and then it just kind of goes out into the ether and we don't really get a lot of feedback on it.
And you mentioned a very valid point that that's predominant in any of these plans. It always talks about how much engagement there is at the specific plan level. Being that a lot of these plans are approved by the village council, you tend to see what that engagement is then. So at that aspect, you can see whether or not taxpayer dollars are properly being allocated for what level of response you're seeing.
I mean, I don't think it would be a big stretch for us if we had a public hearing about, say, for instance, a multifamily dwelling to pay $70 to make sure that people get it in their Facebook ad or whatever social media outlet they have. Or maybe we spend a few bucks on SMS texting and make the option available to our residents who, by the way, will respond to a text 10 times more likely than an email, or, X number of percentage greater than if they were to get a direct mailing or whatever. So I just think that having the ability to make that decision or at least be aware of how we plan on engaging the public
Yes.
and getting more clarity there would go a long way, I think, in a lot of the efforts that we make.
Well, great. Well, Rhonda, would you mind scrolling to the next slide? So a lot of what you suggested isn't something that I'm going to be able to address today. It's something that we're going to have additional conversations looking into items. So what I would see is the potential next steps would be, taking this feedback that I've received today, making some changes where this can then be presented to the village council tentatively at the July 23rd meeting, where then if adopted, the plan could be disseminated to the applicable bodies in August, and then working with staff to try to get this available on our website in September. Rhonda, anyone have any questions about any of that? All right, let's keep it going. So this next section here, I did not print off the 2017 plan, even though I listed it on there, and that's for a purpose because it had already been replaced by this plan. So quite frankly, it is null and irrelevant at this point. But just to make everyone cognizant that there was previously a plan on the books before this one was adopted. Rhonda, would you mind?
Oh, I read this before.
So why do we have economic development strategies? So this is just a list of reasons as to why, we potentially have economic development strategies for establishing goals, allowing the public access to better understand staff responsibilities. Reported annually, it allows the council to see how staff has lived up to those expectations. And as a living document, of course, changes can be evaluated when receiving updates or as needed.
Also in our RC best practice.
Absolutely. Thank you for that fill-in. So let's have a little discussion, shall we? So I would like for everyone to go through each of the below categories and evaluate whether the 2023 economic development strategy meets this criteria. So I will, just as, from a logistic perspective, since you mentioned RRC, our RRC regional planner had reviewed this and said that it does meet those expectations, but it's something to be cognizant of. If anyone has a different perspective, I don't know if there's any thoughts or if we would like to discuss this at all. This was adopted last year.
I say if RRC has already given it the thumbs up, then don't change it.
Right.
Don't fix it.
This change meeting is also checking a box for us. also.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, you know what? Let's keep it rolling.
Yep.
So, areas that change between the former and current economic strategies. Just to go back, so in August of 2023, the village council received update in regards to what the changes were going to be made to the economic development strategies, because we were not in line with what the RRC best practices were. So there have been various meetings with applicable bodies to figure out what changes should potentially occur. And that is when this was adopted by the village council. So Ron, if you wouldn't mind moving forward. So we talked about efficacy. So this is the reason I brought this up. After that plan was adopted, staff had worked together to figure out what the actual efficacy or implementation of the economic development strategies was and currently is. So hopefully, being that a lot of the staff has been here for this approximate amount of time, this gives a good baseline guide in regards to what, if there's comments, questions, or concerns regarding expectations. This is where things currently are. Okay? Just want to make sure that everyone's clear on that aspect, that this is staff's interpretation of what and how and where and why things are the way they are. So yes, just as another note, there were multiple items changed from the previous economic development strategies. And are any of these items that should be revisited? Can we discuss this? One of the items that listed was rental registration. I can say that, Eric Thompson has worked with this municipality for, I believe it was 19 to 20 years now, through PCI, where if rental registration is something that we're wanting to look into regarding possible changes or implementation in general, that, there are required changes to ordinances that would have to occur. And there would be discussion regarding, the roles of PCI along with potential how it would be implemented through the village and some of the additional logistics, that would have to occur. Obviously, I mentioned cost along with establishing a housing appeals board. But what are thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns pertaining to rental registration?
The biggest concern that has been brought up years past has been the general build quality of the houses in Rolling Oaks and Misty Ridge. We had so many complaints that we had to bring PCI into a public meeting to explain the residents, actions and avenues of recourse when their brand new building had deficiencies that were not getting addressed. Water leaking into a basement, cracks in drywall, roof panels flying off. We had to define grass and topsoil because they weren't getting lawns finished. The general build quality of these subdivisions were in poor shape. So now that we found out through the years that 40% or better of this stock is being treated as rental income, who's going to advocate for the people that are using this as an income property or who's paying into it to make sure that that build quality is maintained? We need to make sure that we're providing an opportunity for safe housing for these people. And we know there are issues with how these were constructed. We need to make sure that someone's inspecting to make sure they're kept up.
So enforcement again.
Enforcement, again, is the big issue.
I do know the Village of Caledonia recently scrapped their plans.
They did reach out to the Village of Middleville to ask what, we were currently doing in that as well. So another thing I can say, if it's specific to potential neighborhoods, where if we're referencing possibly larger rental corporations, can have some additional discussions to see whether there's possible options outside of this. But I'm just taking notes at this point.
We can literally just grab Grand Rapids' plan and slap it down and start there.
Okay.
But again, we're on different sides. So we're talking ADUs and enforcement. Now we're talking rentals and enforcement.
Well, mainly because if we don't put this in place, these ADUs are going to turn into rentals and we're going to have a whole nother mess of problems.
So do we see rental registration as something to potentially be looked at around the time of ADUs? Or am I speaking out of turn?
I think to a couple of President Kramer's comments, I think building inspection at the time of construction's very different than 6 months after or a year after. I mean, there's a lot of new homes in both of those developments that have, and I'm just going to speak to yard. So lack of topsoil, things like that. I think the rental registration gives us a unique opportunity to make sure that the property owners, be they the developers themselves or individuals, at the time of inception, when we decide to do this rental registration, if we decide to do that, we can put in a few items to ensure that as we are registering these rentals, that they are required to make sure that they have a good yard. I mean, this is a unique opportunity to actually create a framework post-inspection. And then if PCI is given the framework, then obviously we can hold them to account on turnaround time, things like that. I think, is it the chicken or the egg? Is it just, the poor construction is, that's why they make caulk. It's hard to identify deficiencies in construction at the time that they're inspecting these houses. They're just going in and they're probably checking the bulk, make sure that, the piping is there and the sewer is there. They're not really going on aesthetic. They're not going on long-term safety issues or construction quality issues. But I think we should, given the caliber of these homes and the price that these folks are paying in rent, that we should be holding them to an account. We certainly put Nate through the paces on how we wanted that thing to be aesthetically pleasing. So we didn't end up with, army barracks. So I think that the key here is that we use the rental registration as an opportunity to, both from the village council and from all associated committees, that they are able to and boards to speak to what their perceived requirements would be to move forward, so that we can make sure that we do have aesthetically pleasing places, but have recourse in the event that there are construction deficiencies as well. I just think that at the time that it's hard for a building inspector to say, in 7 months or 12 months, they're going to have a yard or functioning sprinklers, right? So I think it's just going to be tough.
A perfect example, the 3 new houses down in Irving. There was no topsoil brought in. I drive by them every day. There's still a lot of gravel, and none 3 houses are still fighting to have yards put in.
Just to understand the process a little bit better, when they go through this process of getting approvals, do we not indicate that we want them to do this up front?
It's required for a certificate of occupancy to have.
They have to have 2 inches of topsoil
Yeah.
as to where that's
And they
viewed as
just-
satisfactory.
But we had to define that so that it could become enforceable.
Yeah, planning commission had to
Well, one
change
of
the
the ways you
ordinance
do that
to
is
actually have
when
to
they
make
get
that.
their permit, they gotta put in escrow the money to do it.
Yep.
If they don't do that, they're gonna do it.
So we did
That's
require
their
that?
Quality operation.
That was put in
2019?
Yeah, I say it's been fairly recently. It
Yeah.
was about in the middle of the Rolling Oaks phase
Yep,
out.
we switched over to that, yeah.
So this could be the opportunity to double down on some of those lost requirements and make sure that at the end of the day, there's still, the homeowner has the opportunity to throw grass seed down, right? So, I mean, we could probably add this as another layer of ensuring
So,
the aesthetics and safety.
One thing that could be done to help with alleviating that, if it's a potential concern, is you can work with the appropriate bodies in regards to what our current form for standards are for being able to release a certificate of occupancy. That would have to be at a subsequent meeting, but we could have dialogue about that and what changes would need to occur
But
to
PCI was
potentially.
responsible for that.
So no, it would have been the planner, zoning administrator at the time.
I got you.
Yeah, because it's a zoning ordinance.
Yep. But yeah, we have a form 78-46 that stipulates what the standards are for whether or not zoning is issuing approval or authorization to release a certificate of occupancy. So that's something that can work with the board in regards to what these, procedures are. If there's something that needs to be looked at, what those logistics look like. It would, of course, be outside the scope of this, but that's something that, can bring to the commission, and we could talk about at later meeting.
The rental inspection isn't really to catch like zoning issues.
No,
all those cracks. It's just to make sure that these people that move in, who are now our residents, have some protection to make sure the housing is safe that they're staying.
Right.
That's really the bulk of it.
I don't know, but does the village have a list of what rental properties are and what owner occupied or?
No.
No.
They would if they
Yeah.
could, that's what I think.
This
we're
would
speaking of-
create that.
The
So-
data we're speaking of is our last census that told us that
Yeah.
a large majority of our residents are renting.
Right.
So what I think would be,
On a parcel by parcel, the village doesn't know.
No.
so we have ways to
It-
verify,
it
but
takes
we don't
all,
have,
like,
yeah.
a couple days to
Yeah.
go through and see who's paying the water bill versus
Yeah.
who owns the property.
I understand that.
Yep.
Something else. It seems to me that if we're gonna discuss all of this, the first thing is to find out what's there,
Agreed.
okay? We got a rental property here, or is it owner occupied, or four families living in this house, or what's going on? We ought to know that.
You present a very valid point, Commissioner. I think what will be the next steps moving forward regarding this conversation is that to try to have Eric Thompson come to a village council meeting where he could talk through what these logistics will be if we were looking to implement this. I still presume this is going to be potentially beyond that 12-month mark, just because logistics, but have to work with a manager to verify, what potential needs are from a staffing perspective in that too. But ideally, we could, it's see if he can come to the meeting later this month, if that's
Can't the village do a census?
this regarding what?
We don't have our own census department.
Well, I'm saying, why can't we implement a census and find out what's what?
Well,
I think that's the first step.
It would be a voluntary.
Yeah.
We can't force a census in the village limits.
We can put it on the building, the water and sewer.
You can always ask, but
Ronald?
it's that survey.
Owner.
And
There's a way to find
Unless we
out.
had a rental registration, the
Yeah.
rental
That's-
registration solves the problem.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it would be an amnesty period of, this is where we're at now, we're requiring this, so you can voluntarily register, and if we find out later, there'll be a fine. But this is like a
Before
late
anything else
2026, early 2027 issue.
No,
So does that sound fair?
2 years from now?
There's a lot involved. in making
So
that.
we have to establish a housing appeals board. There's changes to the village ordinances. This is all going to take time. There's going to be community engagement too, being that this is something that's completely new. So my suggestion is I can reach out to Eric Thompson, see if he can come and speak to the council regarding what some of these logistics look like. And then pending what the climate is or the feel after that meeting, then, we can work on what some of the possible logistics are, whether this is something along the lines of 26, 27, I don't. But if we move forward. So I concede my time. Thank you, everybody.
you can stay there.
Oh, I can stay there? Oh, okay. Gee, thank you.
More
As,
than 3 minutes, too.
yeah.
Yeah, I forgot to start the timer. Sorry.
Yeah. As this joint meeting is still a regular planning commission meeting, we've got your administrator's report.
So, yeah, this will be the same report that I would anticipate sending to the council at the end of June. Just, so a little bit of rambling here. So the 115 High Street, I was informed by the developer that they are going to be submitting site plans that will be in time for the next regular planning commission meeting. So tentatively plan on reviewing those at the July meeting. Beyond that, I believe the DDA is still working on the parking regulations for Misty Ridge and Rolling Oaks. Have no new news about Baby Bliss. And we all know about the public hearing in April. The business is now open, new dog grooming facility, and the Mid Villa be going before the BRA, hopefully this month, or go to the county next month for a public hearing.
All right.
Any questions?
Questions for Doug?
Was anybody here at the township meeting?
Which township meeting?
The one at the fire barn? Is that
I was
the one
at
you're
that
talking about?
meeting
Yeah.
and a couple of the council members were there too. I could, but I don't know if one of you would prefer to speak.
Well, I felt that a lot of the older concerns of the mid-villa development were resurfacing. I believe there were a lot of misunderstandings of what was being presented, so at that meeting, I think Nate did a really good job of answering a lot of concerns and questions. I think Doug chimed in, Kevin and I chimed in. I don't think that's going to resolve any angst, to be perfectly honest, but
Were these people township people or the village people?
mostly township.
So township?
There was
Yeah.
no one in the village there. that I know.
I mean, I don't have everyone's addresses in the Rolodex, but I would say, it wasn't, my honest opinion is that it was a bunch of people who want Middleville to stay small and they don't want the apartments. It really didn't have much to do with the levy at all, in my opinion.
There for that purpose.
Yeah.
I feel like there was like a really imbalanced opinion about the impact of the TIF on emergency services. We were doing poorly. We got our point across, and I think this probably is constructive criticism to Nate as well, his consultant. The impact on the amount of money that the township wouldn't get for emergency services was so small. I mean, I'm not joking when I tell you that Nate would be happy to just write a check for the difference. It was not a huge impact, and we're talking like $3 per resident per year. It was not a big, huge concern. It just, unfortunately, that message wasn't really that clear, and people were really angry about it. And that was the thing that they really latched onto during that meeting. But to address the rest of the details, it was a lot of rhetoric about, the traffic and crime and all the, the NIMBY stuff that usually surfaces in situations like that. So I do think as a go forward, though, we really should be much more clear, especially on TIP projects, about the real financial impact per person and communicate that, because these people were disproportionately angry about what it costs for a Happy Meal at McDonald's annually than I think was necessarily warranted. So that was my feedback that I felt we got from the people, and it wasn't significant enough to sway, I think, the outcome. And to be honest, I think they didn't even need to be in front of the township. So we found that out afterwards, though.
But the anticipation is that they'll be in front of the authority this month?
Yes.
Okay.
But I think overall, I do think we got our point across of, at least on the TIF consensus, you may be losing $3 on this particular parcel annually a year, but with the developments that are going up front, they're very interested in the development in the back, you're gaining 3 times as much in tax revenue than you would losing. So I think that was at least somewhat heard in that meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's no guarantee that the commercial businesses would be established there if the residential didn't occur.
All right.
Rest assured they will.
Moving on to the code enforcement officer's report.
So there's a lot of code complaints. Most of these are new. One or two have been on there for a little bit, but I don't know if anyone has any specific questions for me. I'd gladly go on for any. Anyone has come?
605 Bernard.
So that property, it's not technically in violation. They are supposed to finish constructing the fence because they have a pool in their backyard. However, it has a temporary pool because they are trying to work things out with the developer in regards to who's, responsible for completing that project. So it's something that he's placed here as a placeholder, because if that temporary fence were to move, the pool is unsecure.
So the escrow just means it's on hold.
There's escrow funds for this project that cannot be released until he meets all the requirements of the village code.
Anything else? No? All right. That brings us to our second public comment session. Sure thing, Craig.
First of all, thank you for everybody for being here and your participation. I think it was a good meeting tonight. And this is going to be an annual event. We're going to plan on having a joint meeting every June, MCOW/Planning Commission meeting, so we can fulfill our RC requirements with that. That being said, have a good night.
Thank you, sir. So we're at commissioner comments, and I will make the comment that, yes, I agree that having an annual meeting like this on what has traditionally been a slower month for the planning commission is great. So I'm not going to poll everybody, but anybody comments? Are we looking to go have dinner?
I'd like to say that I do agree that we need to have a better focal communication point from the village level before we start looking at the toolboxes and how we're gonna communicate with people. We need to get a way of letting them know that we're here, and if they have questions, they can come to us. And I know I was part of the plan when we did the 2017 plan in the surveys. And I had a heck of a time getting participation from people, and I was like looking through all the Facebook groups and how many neighborhood groups are there and joining the neighborhoods and just to communicate and let them know that we're out here and we're doing the survey. And there was one particular group that said, hey, if you're not in our neighborhood, then get off our group. They didn't even want to be part of participating. So, you're trying to get out there and communicate.
Fine, plow your own streets.
Find your own water.
Poop in your backyard.
Oh, goodness. The website that we didn't have before in the Facebook group, so that helps. It's a step in the better direction. So, definitely better.
Anyone else?
But you're still only going to communicate with those who want to be communicated
Yeah.
with.
And if they have Facebook, I mean, not everybody has
Right.
Facebook, so we need a better platform.
All right, well, then, as my custom, I will make the motion we adjourn.
Support.
We have a motion of adjournment with support. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned.
Good job, Doug.
Oh, goodness. Well, thank you. Business. Working with you.